Hello everyone, nice to meet you all again. It's currently 3:02 and we will conduct a conference today. So Katie Newby, who is here with me, and myself, Ronan Chardonneau. So the idea of this conference is to do something which is kind of unusual. Most of the time is, so we're going to do a use case, and most of the time when a use case is presented by an analyst, it's most of the time like 3/4 of the time the analyst who is speaking, and then a quarter of the time with the client. Here this is going to be the reverse mode. So I will leave the floor in a couple of minutes to Katie, who is a client of mine. And the idea is that Katie can introduce you the project that she's working on, and I will explain how I decided to deal with the project management of including Matomo within this given project. So I leave now the floor to Katie, and I will interact only dealing with my part of the slides.
Okay, thanks, Ronan. I'll just share my slides. Can I just check that you can see that, Ronan?
Yes, it looks great.
Okay, lovely. Thank you. Right, so myself and Ronan are going to, as he said, share the presentation today. And the presentation is on using Matomo to collect data on intervention engagement within a research trial. And the case study is a project called WRAPT. So the overview of the presentation is that I'll firstly talk about why I think it's important to measure intervention engagement within a research trial. I will tell you a bit about the WRAPT research project as well. And then Ronan's going to talk about how we use Matomo within the project to collect individual level data on engagement. Then I'll present some early insights from our analytics data, and then there'll be a chance for some questions at the end. So first of all, why it's important to measure intervention engagement within a research trial? Well, there are two reasons. One is to minimise something called non-usage attrition, and I'll go on to explain a bit about what that is. And then also to examine and control for intervention dose. So firstly, on to minimising non-usage attrition. So when we are testing whether a new intervention works, then we typically do something called a randomised control trial. And many of you will be aware of what randomised control trials are already, maybe. But they are, I'll just show my next slide. So they are used all the time in a clinical context to test the effectiveness of something. So that something could be a new drug, or a new vaccine, as is the case for the COVID vaccine, or in my case, and I'm a health psychologist, so I develop interventions that try to encourage people to change their health behaviour. So that could be, for example, to persuade people to use the COVID vaccine. So the intervention itself is not a drug or a vaccine or something like that. It tends to be a behaviour change intervention. But the principle of testing it is exactly the same. So we would also run a randomised control trial. And in randomised control trials, we take a sample population. So this is a smaller group of the wider population we're interested in testing the intervention on. And we'll randomly assign them to two groups. So like the flip of a coin or a roll of a dice, or more commonly using sort of internet-based randomisation tools. But the idea is the same. It's just randomly assigning to one group or the other. And in the one groups, which here we have as group one, all the people in that group that have been randomly assigned to it will get the new drug or treatment, and then we'll measure afterwards how they fared, so what the outcomes were for them. And then in the other group, they'll get the control. So if it is a drug, it might be something like a sugar pill that has no active ingredients. And again, we'll measure the outcome for them. And the important point with the randomization is that by the end, we should have balance in the two groups. So just by chance, we should have approximately even numbers of people of different genders and ethnicities, or with similar levels of health need or health condition. And that's important to make sure that we control for any sort of confounding factors that might also have an effect on the outcome. They should then be evenly spread between the two groups. So in a clinical context, when a new drug is being tested, adherence to the drug is not usually a big problem, although something still to be mindful of. And this is because the drug is prescribed by a clinician and the participants are usually very closely supervised. So you would be asked to go into a clinical context, for example, and you'd be passed the pill on a tray with a cup of water and watched by a research nurse taking it, who then record that you'd taken it. And that would likely be for every dose. And also, as a research participant, you may well, especially if you're in the intervention condition, experience observable and immediate health benefits of taking that drug, assuming that it's effective, but also potentially in the control condition due to placebo effect. So there's lots of things that could be meaning that adherence to that drug within an intervention and trial context is not too much of a problem. Adherence is usually reasonably high. However, in contrast, adherence is a major problem when we're testing e-health interventions. So I mentioned briefly about the kind of work that I do, so to test health behaviour change interventions, and also almost all of the interventions that I develop and test are of the e-health type, so they're interventions delivered via the internet. So here the intervention is neither prescribed nor critical to wellbeing. And this graph, I think, demonstrates quite nicely typical attrition from e-health interventions. So on the y-axis going up the left, you can see at the very top there's a 1, and that reflects 100% of users of the intervention, going down to 90, 80, 70, etc., right down to 0 at the bottom. And then across the bottom on the x-axis, we've got time and modules. So if we take the blue line to start with, the study by Farvelden, this was a 12-week program of internet delivery of an intervention. So it's supposed to engage for 12 weeks in total to have had the full dose of the intervention. But you can see after a couple of weeks, we've already got less than 50% of people still using that website, going down to less than 20% at week 3. And you can see by the end, in fact, there was less than 1% of people still using or still completing the intervention right at the very end. And then for the dashed black line, this was an intervention called Mood Gym, and it's in a trial context again. And there were 5 modules here for this intervention. You can see that less than 70% did module 2, and then module 3, less than 60%, and so on, down to just over 20% doing all 5 modules. And then the solid black line is also Mood Gym. But in this context, it wasn't in a trial. It was just people allowed to have access to it to then see who engaged with it and carried on engaging with it. So outside the context of a trial in which people might be incentivized to use the intervention and also encouraged and reminded by researchers to do so, you can see that engagement is even less. So non-use attrition, so participants ceasing to use the intervention within a trial context, is obviously a big problem for us. And if participants are not using intervention in a trial context, it makes it really difficult to test whether the intervention actually works or not. So in trials, regardless of in trials, the outcome data for every participant is randomised and included in the analysis. So if we have people in that, if you remember that first diagram that I showed you of a randomised controls trial, so we've got people randomised to the 2 groups, and in that top arm we've got people who received the intervention itself. If we've only got a small proportion of those who are actually using intervention in full, you might be thinking to yourself, well, just analyse the data from those people who use the intervention itself and ignore everyone else who didn't. But that threatens the whole integrity of the trial design, which is the randomisation of people to one group or the other. I explained earlier about how we randomise, so we have balance between the 2 arms. But if you're only including a subgroup of those people who have used the intervention to a minimum extent and ignoring everybody else, then you remove that balance, which is so important to that trial validity. So the point of ensuring that everybody, regardless of whether they use the intervention or not in a trial, it's called intention to treat analysis. So if you randomise someone, you always analyse their data regardless, to ensure you've got this balance in design. But the problem, of course, is if you've got a group of people in your intervention condition that haven't used the intervention at all or not very much, then if your intervention is indeed effective, then when you do the analysis, it has the effect of underestimating the effect of the intervention, because you're including in the analysis, in that intervention condition, people who didn't even use it at all or didn't use it very much at all. And remember that diagram of it dropping off steeply, that is often the case for us. So it's really, really important that in a trial context that we do absolutely everything that we can to minimise people not using that intervention or dropping off. Now, ahead of doing a main trial in which we test the effectiveness of the kind of intervention that I've been talking about, we tend to do something called a feasibility randomised control trial, which is exactly the same as a randomised control trial with this randomisation to the two groups. The only thing that's different is it's with much fewer participants. And the purpose of that kind of study is to help us to prepare for a full randomised control trial. And what we're trying to do is resolve or remove all the unknowns. So, for example, to help us to learn what the best method for recruiting participants is, what level of incentive we need to recruit people in the first place, but also to keep them in the trial until the end. So all those kind of things are important for us to establish in this early phase before we do the main thing. But we can also use these feasibility randomised control trials, these preparation type trials, is to examine non-usage attrition, which we've been talking about. So if we look at attrition in this early stage trial, it can tell us some important things, such as whether attrition is associated with particular demographic factors. And of course, we're measuring those in the surveys that we give to people before they have the intervention and then also afterwards. And so if we can link that demographic data up with the data about attrition, we can learn some important things. So if we found out that, for example, females in particular weren't using our intervention or dropping off, then it would be important to maybe interview them as part of some later studies to find out why that might be the case and to try and rectify that. And when we look at the shape of that attrition curve, which we were just looking at before, that can tell us something also important. So if we had, I'm just going to get my mouse to do that. Yeah. So if we had a shape a bit sort of like really steep down like that, that would be a really bad sign for our intervention and tell us that people were disengaging very quickly because they just didn't like it. And then this more kind of sigmoid style curve would tell us that we had some sort of initial interest in it, which then dropped off, as you might imagine, then a bit of a steeper drop up in the middle, perhaps when those less motivated people were leaving, or possibly representing some sort of usability style problems. And then we've got a hardcore sort of set of users at the bottom. So the style and shape, I suppose, of this curve can tell us some important things as well if we're measuring attrition from our intervention during that feasibility randomised control trial. So it's not uncommon for feasibility randomised control trials of e-health interventions to measure non-usage attrition, but measures of engagement are usually quite limited. They're not so fine-grained. So often it's about when people registering within the website itself, so we know who's visiting, and then we know when they stopped visiting, and we might also be able to collect data on whether they've completed modules within that website itself. But that tends to be the limitation or the limits of it. And the use of analytics data rarely happens at all. But I've sort of become increasingly aware recently that analytics data can offer much greater insight into usability issues. For example, are there particular points during the different stages in which people are going through the intervention where they're experiencing some technical issues? It's not very nice, the look and feel of the website, and people are dropping off because they're having problems with it. And these are the kind of things that can be rectified, which if we don't collect this kind of data, we won't know anything about. And typically within feasibility randomised control trials, we tend to have a stage of qualitative research. So we do interviews with our participants to find out more about their experience of being a research participant and what we can learn to improve the trial. And this would be a great stage at which to ask people to, so we can draw hypotheses from these usability issues and then develop them further through those interviews to find out more about people's experiences. So those two things would dovetail really nicely together. So yeah, we can do these feasibility randomised control trials and examine usability issues with a view to properly preparing a much better and resolving any of these issues in preparation for the main trial. And I just want to make the point that I'm very aware that within the tech sort of web industry sector, that usability and examining the sort of client or customer's use of websites and all these friction points and things that are going wrong in order to maximize engagement and getting people through to the end point, whatever that might be, like purchasing something, is done really commonly and very well. But really in my field, it's rarely done at all, not very much at all. And I just know there's a huge amount to be learned and gained from collaborating with people who know much about this. And I'd be really interested in hearing from somebody who would be interested in working with me in that kind of way. So yeah, I've hopefully sort of made the case for why it's important to look at non-usage attrition and for minimising that in a trial. We know it's important to do that, and running these types of feasibility randomised control trials, which are really common, is a great opportunity to look at attrition and try and remedy it and do something about it. And I'm really, and everyone else in my field, just at the beginning of trying to understand how best to measure this type of attrition, to understand what all the measures and things that we can collect are telling us, and also to make the right sort of changes so that in the main trial we can actually have as high a attrition as possible. I mean, if people don't like the intervention, that's another thing. That's a different question to be answered. But if it's to do with how the website itself is operating, I think there's lots we can do about that. And then the other issue, and I've only got 2 slides on this one, it's a much sort of smaller point really, but equally important, is around examining and controlling for dose. So the amount or dose of an intervention that a participant receives in a trial can affect the strength of the outcome. So again, back to that randomisation that we talked about. So those in the top arm who receive the intervention. So we look to see what the outcomes are. So if it's a stop smoking intervention, for example, we'll measure number of cigarettes per day that are had before the intervention and afterwards, and then we'll compare the 2 arms to look at the number of cigarettes smoked. So we need to know the dose of that intervention. So if it's a web intervention, we stop smoking, we need to know the amount of consumption of that website. Have they gone back a lot every day? Have they reviewed everything, ordered everything they can, that sort of thing, to know the dose. And that way we can control for it in the analysis. So we kind of can just isolate the effect of the intervention and not the amount they're having. But then also we can measure the correlation or the strength of the relationship between dose and outcome as well. And those kind of things are really important for us to understand. But you can't examine what you don't measure. So we really need to understand what is the dose, the amount that people are having of each of our interventions. And this is to do with the main trial itself. So if we can measure dose, and for this, it's really important that the outcomes are linked to each individual participant in the study. So if we can measure dose, then we can understand things such as, is there a linear relationship between dose and outcome? So in other words, the more of the intervention that somebody has, the greater the benefit. Or is it there are non-linear relationships? There's a point of saturation at which doesn't really make any difference whether you have any more or not. Or is there a minimum dose that everyone needs to have in order for an effect to be achieved? And analytics data can also be used for this and could provide us with really precise and detailed measures of the dose for each individual, such as which pages are accessed, how long people spend on each page, which videos are watched, and for how long. So I'd now like to go on telling a little bit about a intervention that I developed called WRAPT. When I say I, not me alone, me with a fantastic team of other researchers. So first, just say a little bit about the study we're doing. So we're at the stage of doing the feasibility randomised controlled trial, so the preparatory study before the main trial. And this aims to establish if the main randomised controlled trial is feasible and to inform our preparations. And we are using analytics data to better understand any possible usability issues so that they can be addressed ahead of the trial. So to minimise the non-usage attrition that I talked about, but also to learn how best to measure dose in preparation for our main randomised controlled trial. So the wrapped intervention itself, I'm going to show you in a minute what the website looks like, but just a little bit of information about it. So it aims to increase condom use by addressing factors such as people's attitudes towards condoms, so whether they feel positively or negatively about them, and the beliefs that underlie that, people's self-efficacy for communicating about condoms and their use. So this is about broadly speaking, how confident you feel to raise condom use with a partner for the first time, and also how confident you feel in using them correctly. And it's also about increasing access to condoms, so about making them more available to people through a condom distribution scheme. And there are 6 components in total, which are tailored to individual need. So at the very start of access to the website, we ask our users to answer some very quick yes/no questions about their main barriers to condom use, and then they get allocated between 1 and 6 of the components. So the intervention itself hopefully is quite closely aligned to their needs and interests. And there are 3 products which can be ordered: a trial pack of condoms, a condom carrier, and access to a service which supplies condoms on a monthly basis. And there are also 3 lots of videos. So I'm just going to change my screen to show you the website itself. So Ronan, just shout if you can't see this, otherwise I'll just assume that everybody can. So this is the wrapped website, and after you've answered those few quick questions at the start, this is what you will see. And this person here has been assigned all 6 intervention components, and these are represented by these blocks on the screen here. So I won't show you all of it, but I'll just give you a bit of a flavour for it. So with the sample pack here, if we click on that. So here people get the chance to customise the pack. It's a box with a tray, and then they can choose the colour and an insert that goes inside it. And then they get to, choose that. And then they get to order it, and it has 12 different types of condoms and 3 sachets of lube inside there. And then we've got videos as well. So this one is about a video, and this is of young people demoing how to put on a condom correctly without any errors. And there are various other videos as well, other things to order, but that just gives you a bit of a flavour of the website and what it looks like. So I'll just go back to the presentation again. So in terms of data collection, the study requires participants in our feasibility randomised control trial to complete activities over a 12-month period. So they consent to the study and complete a survey, and then they get directed to they're randomised. They go into one arm, which is to receive the wrapped intervention website that I've just shown you, or they get randomised to a control website, which has the same branding and sort of colour and logos, but has very basic static information on condom use and sexually transmitted infections. And then they get sent another survey 3 months later, and also a test for an STI called chlamydia, which gets sent, like a test gets sent in the post to them to complete. And then at 6 months, another survey, and then at 12 months, another survey, and also the same test for an STI. So they've been asked to do quite a lot from us, and they're incentivized to complete those different activities. And we're using some database management software called RedCap to consent participants to prompt them to complete all those different activities that I've just told you about. and to record their data. So it sends out the surveys to them, and we record their test results for the STIs in there as well. Now, REDCap is used to direct participants to the 2 different websites. So there's an automated email that goes out to people after they've been randomised, which has a link into one of the 2 different websites, and they have to click on that, and then they'll go to each of the 2 different websites. And every activity that any participant in our study does is linked to a unique ID. So everything they do is logged against that unique ID. So we knew we were going to be running this feasibility randomised control trial, and we knew that we wanted to be able to measure attrition, both sort of broadly on an aggregate level, but also individually. So we can look at things like demographic data and how that links to attrition, but then also to work out how best to measure dose for our main trial so that we can understand those important things about how dose relates to outcomes. But we really didn't know how to go about doing this. We wanted something more fine-grained than just the website itself could tell us. And I was already beginning to become interested in analytics data, and through a bit of serendipity came across Ronan, and we began working together on this project. So over to Ronan to explain a bit about how you went about this, and I'm going to advance the slides for you, Ronan. So just tell me, I'll go to the first one, then tell me when to move along.
That's perfect. Thank you very much, Katie, for preparing all this work. So yeah, there are many things to say here. I think the first thing to mention is that there's been to me really a project that's really motivated me a lot, because it started by a training. So the team of Katie asked me to come in the UK and come and train a full team. So I took my backpack. I fly from France to the UK, and I trained our team for about 3 days. I think it was 3. I don't remember if it was 3 or 5 days, but it's really the kind of project which is really transforming you as an analyst, because it's a project which really doesn't look like any others. It's not like a public website on which you can land on and you can easily guess and find what are the different data collection points that you need to implement. Here in the case of the RAB project, the first thing I learned about is that it was using a PHP framework that I didn't know, which was CodeIgniter. The developer of the website is a third-party agency based in India, so it wasn't like I was talking to Katie straight away, and Katie could implement the different tracking code that I wanted. It was really like a 3-party project. So the technology is named CodeIgniter. I wasn't really scared about the technology CodeIgniter that I didn't know. I just went on a famous search engine and found out that it was a PHP framework. From this, I knew already that it means a project that I could not put my hands on, but I will have to give a recommendation to a third-party company. So to say the the dev company, which means for me project management in terms of analytics project. It means that I really needed to well structure my project in order for them to know what they need to implement, and I needed to ensure as well that Katie and her team could clearly understand what we're going to implement, and that it align with everything that Katie has mentioned before, which are the need that they have in terms of data collection for this research project. So the key aspect of the project, as Katie showed to you, few pages. It's, I think, maximum between 15 to 20 pages. So it seems like, oh, that's an easy project, but with a lot in terms of data collection. So you have a lot of advanced tracking code which were necessary, including the measurement of events, including the use of custom dimensions, so to say level, visit level information data. And as well, we quickly saw it a user ID. So the possibility to know who is the individual, let's say, who is making those different choices. We make the choices to go for a data layer, so to use Matomo Tag Manager, because the idea was to have something which was really consistent. because the thing is that we have not many pages, but all those pages are critical. And if we were going without a data layer, so to say, if I was taking in end the project by just asking to add the container on all the page and then decide to use by either scrapping or either use automatically let's say the tag manager to collect the different data point, high chances that in the meantime the dev company would have made changes to the DOM of the page and everything would have exploded and I will have to redo the full data collection. So that's the reason why we design a really consistent data layer which have been implemented directly by the dev company in order to ensure that if something breaks in terms of data collection, I wasn't the person responsible of screwing up the data collection, and of course it gave more responsibility and involve more the dev team, which was really the right solution in this specific project because I couldn't have the end on the source code. So those points were really critical, and this is really where this is more like a project management analytics system rather than let's say an analyst doing really all the work on the platform. We really need as well to have a clear quality assessment process because as Katie showed us, it's the RAP project is a place where people are ordering, so they're not making some purchase because the product are for free, but they are making some orders, and it's once you make an order, you cannot order back the different elements. So it means that we didn't want all the time to go to Katie and say, okay, we make some order in order to test our data collection. Please, could you remove us from the system? And we have to make another order again in order to test the platform. So that's why we needed to really have a clear project management system in which we can ensure, okay, here the tracking code has been implemented over here. We test it, it works. Okay, so we tick in the box, or either it doesn't work, and then we go back to the dev team in order to ask for a new implementation. And the other point which was of critical importance was the use of custom dimension. So to say to add additional data which were not collected by default within Matomo to each individual, so as the use of the premium feature named custom report, which was one of critical importance because as we just saw it, the need of data is big and it has to be crossed with different dimensions. So this is where the use of custom dimensions was of critical importance. I'm done for this slide. Okay. So next one is the way that we decided to work. So this is the project management part. This work has been reviewed by a colleague of mine that you know who made a conference as well, named Frederic Forster. And this is the way we work with the agency. So it consisted of myself drafting this document reviewed by my colleague Frederic in order to have a document which is listing what the data layer is about, and then showing this document to the team of Katie to explain to the team of Katie what this is all about, because that's clearly not the kind of thing that you see within the Matomo's documentation. Here we are more looking at a project management document made by an analyst, and which as well serve in terms of transparency with the techie team for them in order to see if, okay, this is the engagement that we took together. You add the responsibility of deploying the code, which is on the column number, let's say 5 for you, which is named code to push when the action is made. Here, as you can see, you can clearly see the data layer which was implemented. So in our case, it was for every step of the order made by the user, we could push an event to Matomo. And as I previously said, we add for this tracking code to be consistent. So that's why we decided to use a data layer. And in the last column of this document, you can clearly see that there is our recommendation, which is in our case that this data layer wasn't implemented properly. So please review on this given page that you have well included this given piece of code on the button when someone is pressing it. So really here to understand how to deal with such a big project. It's really like project management. Before all that, that's the most important. I have to precise as well one thing, that we make some choices with Katie and her team, not to go for the e-commerce tracking code. So just to let you know as well that when you deal with such a project, you have some choices to make, because as we saw, a user can make some orders, but those orders are not paid orders. So we had the choice to go either for e-commerce tracking code or either to go for the event tracking code. And we decided to go for the event one because it was like more justified to go for it, rather than having to create some additional data who were not existing within the system, such as, let's say, the tax amount, such as the order price, such as the transactional order, that kind of thing. I'm good for this part. Next one is kind of the similar thing. The big difference is that on the previous slides that we were showing, it was about some variables that we are inserting within the data layer. On this one, this is another method that we use with the tag manager, which is the push event method, which consists of sending custom event to the data layer in order for it to react on the interaction of the visitor. And as well, this is how we succeed to handle it. Okay, I'm good for this one. Okay, and last but not least, this slide shows in fact all the different variables. So those are all the different needs that we list with Katie and ask for her validation to see if there was any data which were missing out of this list. And once validated, of course, this is what we implemented. But here once more, what we are showing is really the project management part. Is like there is a lot of needs from the client, but we need at some point to put a limit and say, okay, we don't need extra more data. Do we agree that this list is the limit and you all need those? And if yes, of course, this is kind of what is finally defining the final price that the analyst will put on the quote, let's say. And as well, yes, I'm good with this slide. I think that was the last. Oh, yeah. Oh, and that's as well a critical part of the project, and that I really loved in it, is that during the training, I showed to Katie and her team how to deal with the custom reports feature of Matomo. And I've been surprised to see that when I came some days after or weeks after the implementation with the RAP project, that a lot of custom reports were created. And that's a good sign of the training works. And now people have the solution well in hand, and they are creating as many custom reports as they can. And here you can clearly see how the custom reports really enhance the data which were in the system of Matomo, because here we got the user ID with the different components that it chooses and the date at which the individual decided to pick up the product. I think I have one slide left. Yes, and here is another report which is really showing for each individual what are the different components, and you can clearly see that on line number 1, from line number 1 to line number 4, the individual decided to pick up all the components, but line number 5, for some reason, this individual decided to not pick up all the different components, which was one of the needs which was requested from this research, which is about, okay, what are the different choices that people are making. And I think I'm good for my slides. Yep, exactly.
Okay, thanks, Ronan. So in the last section before the Q&A, I'll just present some early insights from our data collection. So from the custom reports that Ronan was just talking about, we've been able to learn a lot already. We haven't finished collecting our data yet. We're just a few months into the project. So we haven't learned everything that we will be able to learn by the end, but I'll show you what we've got so far. So this is just how I've used the data, and what's working best for me is to think about the flow of people through the website in order to sort of see whether things are going wrong within the website, and if something needs kind of attending to before our full trial. So things that might be leading people to drop out, basically, so the non-usage attrition that I talked about before. So 91 people at the point at which I downloaded the data from the custom reports had at that point been randomised to RAP, so gone to that top of the two different arms in the randomisation. And of those, 56 people clicked on the link. So I told you about how our software RedCap sent an email invite to everybody, inviting them to go to one of the two different websites. So this is 91 people sent the invite to Wrapped, and 56 of them clicked on the link and went through to the website. So not everybody's doing that, despite us incentivizing them with a voucher. So we'd lost 35 at that point. And then when they first land on the website, they have to create a profile and sort of register. So and then they also complete some tailoring questions. So these are the ones that determine how many of the components of the 6 components that they get. So between them sort of landing on the website and creating a profile, we've lost just 2 people in that stage of completing the tailoring questions. So I was a little bit concerned. I think there's 10 questions in total. People might get a little bit irritated by that sort of section, but we've only lost 2 there. So that's quite a good sign for me. And then we've got registration being complete. And then between that stage and, visiting the homepage, we've lost nobody. So that's another good sign that how the whole stage is working well. So our biggest concern really is that email that's encouraging people to go visit in the first place perhaps is a bit boring and doesn't sell the website very well. Although in a trial context, it's kind of difficult to do that because we can't spell out the things that are good about the intervention website very easily in that context, but we could perhaps try harder. And then next slide. So Ronan was talking about people being assigned different components, and I mentioned how there's up to 6 different ones. So we were interested in knowing about the proportion of people that were going to get assigned the different numbers of them, because when we started out this study, we really didn't know that. So they answer these 10 questions at the start of the website, and depending on their answers, they'll get assigned either all of the 6 of them or just the one of them. There's always a minimum of 1. And this is how it's worked out. So no one's had just 1, even though that's a possibility. And then very few people have had 2, 3, or 4 components. Most people have either been assigned 5 or 6 components. So that's useful in terms of helping us plan for the main trial. It helps us to work out resource need, because some of the components, at least where they're ordering something, has a cost associated with it. So that's really useful. And then I explained that there were 3 different things that people could order, and I showed you the sample box, the website page relating to that. So this is the box with 12 different types of condoms to try out in it. So 54 people were assigned the sample box in total. That's everyone who went to the website, because everyone gets the sample box by default. So 54 were given that. And then, so on that main page where you've got the 6 different boxes that you can click on in order to take you through to the relevant page, 54 people have seen the one for the sample box, and 48 of them have actually clicked on that and gone to visit that page. We've just lost 6 at that point, which is not bad. And then between visiting that page and then placing an order, we've lost 11 people. So that's 11 people maybe who just didn't like the look of it and just thought that wasn't really for them. But that's an assumption, but something perhaps to speak to people later on in the study when we come to do our interviews. And then those who then click to go through to the next page, they're sort of progressing and making an order. They've chosen what box they want, what insert they want. We've just lost 1 person. And then we lost 2 on the next page between the point at seeing that second page and actually placing the order. So yeah, I was quite pleased with that. It shows to me that process of ordering is quite smooth and straightforward, and perhaps no one's experiencing any technical problems or issues with usability around the ordering process. And really, it's the same picture with condom ordering. So 49 people ordered that. I'm not going to go through all the numbers on this one, but it's the same pattern that we've lost just as a handful at the start who were never visiting that page. And then the actual ordering seems to be fairly straightforward for everybody. And the same with ordering the condom carrier as well. And then there's 3 different types of video that people can go and see. I'm just going to do one slide on one of the videos, which is the demo video that I showed you. It's a completely different picture here. So 47 people allocated this video, but only 16 actually clicked on that box to go and visit the demo page. That's telling us that that homepage is not selling this demo video at all. People aren't even going to click on it. Well, only 16 of our 47 did. And then only of those 16, only 7 actually then went ahead to click on the video and play it. And then nobody watched it in full. And the mean time spent watching the video was 17 seconds. So not attracting people to go and visit it. When they do go and visit the page, not playing it very much, not many people playing it. And then when they do, disengaging quite quickly. So we've got quite a bit of work to do on the video, the demo video, but the same picture is true of the other types of videos as well. They all need looking at. So what we've learnt, we've learned that we can use analytics data to gain some important insights into non-usage attrition, and we've just started to kind of touch the surface with the data we've got already, and we're going to use this to make some improvements. So my conclusions, I've kind of touched upon already, are that the homepage is attracting users to visit are the first 3 components, the things that you can order. And once on those component pages, there's good conversion to ordering. There seems to be no issues with the ordering process. But the homepage is not attracting people to visit the video content. And those video component pages are also not working very well to encourage users to watch the videos when they're already there. And then the videos aren't being watched for very long. So the first few seconds aren't encouraging people to carry on. And we still have lots and lots to learn about this field and what is really possible in terms of analytics. So I'm very much a newbie in this situation. And our solution for linking individual level the user ID that we're collecting in REDCap for all our surveys and STI testing, and linking that to our individuals as they go through to the 2 different websites, so we can collect this analytics data. That process that Ronan worked out for us by liaising with us and also our development company has worked really well and has been successful. We've had no problems with gathering the unique user ID of everyone in Matomo and seeing what they're all doing. And creating these custom reports and gathering all that data from there. That's all worked out really well. And that means it's going to be possible for us to measure dose in our main trial in quite a fine-grained way, which is really useful. And we're just beginning to think about how we'll calculate a sort of standardized score for everybody in our trial at an individual level based on the products that are allocated and ordered, and also which videos to watch and how long for. So that's the end of the presentation. So I'd just like to acknowledge our funder, the National Institute for Health Research, and all of the team working on this with me as well at the University of Hertfordshire and others. And on to any questions.
Thank you very much, Katie. Thank you very much for this great presentation. I'm looking at the chat right now. We have approximately, let's say, maximum 5 minutes, because after there's other talk at 4 p.m. I'm just going to pick the first one, which is which was the most useful Matomo tools used during this project?
Ronan, you might have a view on this, but for me, I suppose I might not be using the right terms, but it was the custom ID. Mm-hmm. And then also the reports as well. I mean, the reports are something that I go into all the time now to look at, to gather the data, to help me understand the usability of the website. And all the slides I've just presented with those flowcharts all comes from those custom reports.
Okay. I'm looking at the chat. There's another question, but it's more looking with logistic, which is about, will it be possible to download the presentation? I mean, will it be possible for you to send it to, do you allow me to share it with the audience, or would you like to keep the presentation for yourself, or can it be?
That's fine, Ronan. Yeah, I'm happy for anyone to have it. So I send it to you?
Yeah, well, I think I have it in my mailbox, so I will just make it as a PDF and then share it back. I let the audience write down the last question. We still have, let's say, 4 minutes left. Do you have, for example, any questions, Katie, that you would like me to ask you for the audience, or any?
Do I what? Sorry.
Do you have any questions for you? I mean, do you have any question that you would have expect the audience to ask you and that you would like me to ask you?
Do I have any questions? I suppose the thing that I'm still struggling with the most is linking all the data in the custom report. So each custom report, I can download the data as an Excel file.
Mm-hmm.
So, for example, if we're talking about the components allocated, I can download it. So I've got one column, which is the user ID. And then, did they have component 1? Yes, no. Component 2? Yes, no. I can create it like that. Then I can download another separate report that says, did they visit the sample pack page, for example? And that'll be a completely separate one. And so at the moment, they're all very separate like that. And then I have to combine them all sort of together.
Mm-hmm.
So I suppose, and also every time I want to update the data, it's not easy. I can use date, I suppose, but I can't just filter by everything since I last looked and then download that and add it in. I have to just keep manually looking and then updating my Excel data based on that. So I don't know whether it's possible. This is more a question for you than the audience,
Yeah.
Ronan. But this is something that I'm struggling most with at the moment. And yeah, I'd be keen to know about if there's a way to kind of make that process a bit more straightforward, I suppose. But might be getting to the limits of what Matomo can provide.
Okay, great. Yeah, I don't have yet the answer. I think that we are looking for custom reports with far more dimensions. I guess that's the key thing here. The maximum is really 3 custom dimension, and from what I remembered, yeah, every time you asked something, I did my best in terms of optimization. So you can, you can just put up to 3 custom dimension and then filter by some other custom dimension. But at the moment, I'm not sure that there's plans to extend the number of custom dimension, which correspond more to what you would like. Like you export the full Excel file, and you will get as many custom dimension as you need. So in our case, I don't remember if we have up to 5 or 10, but then you can refilter back in Excel. Alfonso says thank you because you answered to his question about which was the most useful Matomo tools, and we don't have any questions left. So I guess that's the time to close the conference talk. Once more, thank you very much, Katie, for your time. Thank you very much for the presentation, and as well, I would like to thank all the attendees of this conference, and I wish you all a great end of Matomocamp. There's just two conferences left, starting in 5 minutes, and then we have the closing ceremony at in 1 hour, so at 5 p.m. Thank you very much, Katie.
Pleasure. Good luck with the rest of the conference.
Thanks.
Goodbye.
Goodbye.